Welcome back, everyone, to another incredible episode of Chat with Dan here. Now, for today, and what can I say? We're starting up the weekend epic, you know? I mean, what better way to have an incredible Super Saturday than to be chatting with the legendary, the one and only, the badass, the super duper Michelle? How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, as I was saying before, what better way to have a badass Saturday? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a great start. This is a great way to start it.
There you go. I like it. Now, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, follow, but also in the description below, you're going to find all of Michelle's social media. Let's follow her and let's discover why she's super badass, right? Now, without further more, let's jump in. So I want to start this whole conversation by throwing out the first question, which is, what initially drew you to the world of acting and stunt performing?
Well, what originally brought me in, I will say, I didn't know that being a stunt performer was an actual career path that someone like me or anybody could have chosen. So stunts itself was a little bit of a discovery on my part. But I've been a performer my whole life. I grew up as a baton twirler, and a lot of my training as a baton twirler included dance and gymnastics. And I went all the way to the highest level, competed at the world championships 8 times in a row and won medals, did all of that. And generally what happens is you sort of phase out of it as you graduate from high school, you move on. And I really felt like I had more to offer and more that I wanted to explore. And I wanted to keep performing. So I moved to Vancouver to become a professional dancer, did that for a few years, got into circus, performed with a professional circus company. And through circus, I started meeting other stunt performers. And that's when I realized that, like, oh, stunts could be a job for me. And of course, I've always known that acting was a thing. And it was one of those things that was like, oh, one day. I remember moving to Vancouver and driving around the city and driving past some of the film studios. And I remember like looking there, I'm like, one day I'm going to work in there. So it all just sort of came full circle, and I found my way into stunts. And when I started doing stunts, I was like, well, this is also a great time to practice acting. And so I started taking acting classes and going down that route. And so it just sort of, I would say it found me. And it really, stunts especially, really encompasses all of the training I've been doing for my entire life. And it puts it into this nice little space where I can take all that training and all that knowledge and experience I have, but it's different and it's creative, and there's a lot of things that I've never done before. So that's really what has kept me in it and kept me going. And acting is a really interesting way of performing that feels challenging for me. And so I just really enjoy it. And that's how I got here. I one day was training in a gym doing circus stuff, saw some stunt performers playing with swords, and I was like, I can do that. So I went and played with swords, and they're like, you should do stunts. I was like, you're right. And here we are.
There you go. That's a badass start. Now
Yeah.
I start to figure out why you're super badass. I get it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That is awesome. And tell me, what was like the first stunt you ever performed in a movie set? Like, how did it feel?
Well, I sort of have 2 openings. My first actual gig with weapons was actually for motion capture, and it was for Barbie and the Three Musketeers.
Okay.
I played Barbie, or her name was Corinne, or something similar to that. And it was a lot of fencing. So I had to learn how to fence, and I got the job because people knew I could dance and I could also use weapons. And it just sort of came up that I was the person that got used. And so I had to do a lot of fencing and then some like dance and acrobatic skills. And so that was like my first stunt gig, even though it wasn't necessarily stunts. And then about 5 or 6 months after that, I was on Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. And that was my very first union credit as a stunt performer. We had been hired to maybe do some circus type stuff in the Camp Half-Blood scene, and they ended up not using it. So they just kept us around as the Camp Half-Blood stunt warriors. And so I did some sword fighting and all of that. And it was about 3 weeks of work, and it was amazing because I was with a big group of the stunt community, and I got to know everybody, and I got into the union and all of that in one gig. And so it was really nice. It felt exciting. It felt like there was a new opening for me where all of my skills and all my training up until then, there was this big open curiosity of like, what could I do? What could I use these baton and dance and circus skills and create into a whole new career for myself? And I really just was really intrigued by the question and the curiosity and the creativity of that.
I mean, it's amazing. Like the whole work behind to it, like the whole preparation they do for for yeah for like a specific stunt scene, especially
Mm-hmm.
like with swords or like with all
Yeah.
of that. It's I remember when I saw, I mean, years ago when I saw like the behind the scenes of Star Wars: The Revenge of the Sith, and they were like
Mm-hmm.
doing, like they were there were years and years and months of preparation of doing like the exact, the
Yep.
stunts and everything, and then the actors would say that eventually, things happen and they will sometimes get hit in the knuckles or in the fingers, but just the way it is. But it's super cool when you
Mm-hmm.
manage to see like a small taste to it. You're like, that's so cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
It's a
know.
lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And tell me, like, how do you prepare both mentally and physically for demanding stunt roles?
That's a really great question. This is actually the mental and the physical preparation is something that I consider a bit of a special interest for me. I'm really, really passionate about the physical preparation within training. Like, what can you do when, like, a lot of times when you're showing up for a stunt day specifically, I just had one last week or the week before where I was thinking to myself, I'm like, there is no way I could have trained for this. Yet, all of my training makes it so that I can do this job. And a lot of what stunts is you're figuring it out on the day as you're doing it. And so for me, I really, really love fitness and like functional training of like, how can I physically condition and prepare my body to be able to adapt and figure out how to do these complex tasks under pressure in a costume in environments that are not always, let's say, the most ideal. Like, you're really cold or you're really hot, you're on the side of a mountain, you're in the water. And so I really enjoy the physical preparation of it. I work with a trainer a couple times a week, and it's specifically functional training of like taking these movements like we're doing in a fight scene where there's a lot of twisting. You have to use the ground. So we're going to practice really functional, healthy twisting in my body, working on core strength, mobility, power, agility. I do a lot of plyometrics training so that when I show up on set and I have to do a fight scene and it has to look really dynamic, I have that physicality and that muscular endurance in my body. I've loved fitness since I was a kid. I find the mechanics of the human body really, really fascinating. And I think that's why I've made my career so physical, is because I just want to keep moving and I want to keep discovering what's possible for me. The mental preparation is really, really important. And I think it's one of the things that often gets overlooked. But with stunts specifically, even acting is a different acting is a different mental preparation than stunts is. Both equally as important. Stunts, there's the whole element of the health and safety. Is how do I do this gnarly gag safely in a way that is not going to injure me, but also is not going to traumatize me? Because there are some things that you really have to like switch your brain off and give yourself the like, you have to prepare yourself to be the most present and confident and in the flow as possible, but there's moments where you're actually terrified. And so it's really this question of how do you overcome those moments and find the right mental space to be in? Because I find, and I speak from experience in this, where there's moments where I'm really apprehensive, and those are the moments where I either get hurt or whatever I'm doing feels more dangerous than it actually is. Because of course, on the safety side of things, we're going to try to eliminate all the variables possible. We're going to make it as safe as possible for the performer to do. But there are moments where my own agitation and doubt and fear can sometimes get in the way, and those are the hardest bumps. And so what I'm constantly trying to find is that flow state of like, where do I need to be for this, and what do I need to say to myself to get in. So I do a lot of meditation. I am all about nervous system regulation, so I do a lot of like somatic shaking and tremoring, because I often feel like I have a little bit more energy than I need sometimes when you want to be really calm and really still and really present. So the somatic work is great for me, but also training really helps with that. So it's sort of like this full circle of the physical training is going to help with the mental aspect of it, and the mental aspect is going to help with the physicality of all of it. But I do have to give myself a pep talk most mornings, especially when I'm doing something that I may be a little bit fearful is not the right word, but there is a little bit of anxiety involved. So making sure that I have a specific routine for me. I'm not drinking too much caffeine on the day. That's a big one for me. I'm getting a lot of sleep. I'm taking care of my body, and all of those put together put you in the right mental state, because stunts, I will say the film industry in general is not for everyone. It's really, really intense, and you have to have some mental fortitude enable you to transverse through the industry, or you just get torn apart and your soul gets sucked out of you. And that happens to a lot of people, and it's really unfortunate that that's the way it is. But the mental preparation side, I would say, is becoming more and more important for me specifically, but I think for a lot of people in general.
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the end, you need to take care of your body. I mean, it's your instrument
Yeah,
that will help you to, perform. So, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And tell me, like, what's the most challenging stunt or fight scene that you ever had, and how did you overcome any obstacles that were happening along the way?
What's the most difficult? I find that I don't know if I have a most difficult one. I've had ones where I feel like maybe I haven't done the best job, or I've gotten in my own way for some of them. I had what it's called a ratchet. It's a type of wire gag where you're hooked up, you're wearing a harness, and you're hooked up to a single piston machine that's pressure, like a pressure valve. So they can set it to a certain pressure, and that dictates how strong of a pull you're getting. And I was doing one, it was there was like 7 of us all getting ratcheted and hand pulled wire pulls away from this explosion. And I just couldn't find on the day, I couldn't find the mental space that I needed to be in. And I was just sort of vibrating with anxiety. And where I had been picked was down, really low down on my hip, as low as I could go. And then the line was attached to the floor. So when they press a button to do the pull, I hit the ground before I even have a chance to blink. And then I get dragged like 20 or 30 feet. And I just couldn't wrap my head around what I needed to do in order to hit the ground safely. And what ended up happening is I was just not like, even as we were setting up for the gig, and we're all attached to our harnesses, they're saying rolling, and they're just about to call action, and I was just like, I'm not there, like I can't get there. I was so apprehensive and worried, and not feeling confident about what I was doing. And then they hit the button, and what I needed to do was to get to my side and land on my hip so that I could drag, but I didn't get there quite fast enough. Again, this is what happens when you have that little bit of tension in your body, rather than just sort of letting yourself go with it and trusting that your body knows what to do because of the physical training. And I ended up landing almost not quite square on my tailbone, but pretty close, a little bit off to the right. And my head snapped back. So I like had the whiplash of my head going back as I'm hitting the ground. And then I get dragged, and my whole like left leg, I landed on my right hip and my left leg seized. And so for the whole rest of the day, I just felt awful. I don't know if you've ever had whiplash, but whiplash does not feel good. It's not good for you. It can be a type of concussion. My head didn't hit the ground, thankfully, but the whole rest of the day, I was dealing with my left adductor, my inner thigh, being like totally seized and locked down. Like I could barely lift my leg. And it was just that it wasn't that the gag was too dangerous or something happened to that. It was me not being able to get myself in the right space, and I paid the price for it, and I still feel like I'm paying the price for it. That was over 10 years, not 10 years, 5 years ago, and I still feel like my pelvis is not the same since then, and I still feel like I'm dealing with that tiny little injury. And it was right before the original lockdowns, and so I finished that gig, had about 2 days off, and then was off to another show, and then another show, and then the whole world shut down, and I just wasn't able to get it looked at soon enough, and then it just sort of went away on its own, and here I am 5 years later paying the price.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, yeah, that sounds challenging.
Yeah, but every stunt performer has got a bump like that, and unfortunately, like, you do your best to prepare yourself, but sometimes things just happen in the moment, and that's part of why the job is so challenging, is because there is this aspect of you could get hurt, and that's pretty minor as an injury compared to some of my peers and other people that we've heard of or we know, where like it's much more serious than, ow, I hurt my pelvis and it hurts to sit down sometimes. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as you said, I mean, it's part of the somehow it's part of the gig, you know,
yeah,
things happen.
yeah.
So, yeah. And tell me, like, how do you balance the creative side, the creative side of acting with the intense physicality of stunt work?
Oh, that's my favorite place. My like sweet spot in terms of performing is a category that we have up here in Canada called stunt actor. So that means you are the actor delivering the lines, your face is on camera, you're also doing your own stunts. That's my sweet spot. A lot of the roles that I go out for on the acting side are like action related, prefer stunt performer roles anyway. So that's kind of my niche. That's my favorite. It is two different mental preparations, as I said. So that's why I like stunt actor roles, because they're very challenging in that when I'm acting in a scene, I need to be in a very like calm, still present space. But then the action requires all this intensity and over exaggeration. So when you're performing, and this is like for film fighting, or if you're on stage performing, you are performing in a heightened way. So everything is bigger and longer and more extended than it would be in, say, a real fight. Like, I'm not going to do a big hook like this in a real fight, but in a film fight, I have to make that read for camera. So I have to do it bigger than I think. But then when we get to the acting, everything has to be very like and still and minimal and subtle. And so I love the juxtaposition of that. And when I just have to show up and do words on a day, lovely. I can give myself the preparation I need for the acting side. Or when I just have to show up and do action on the day, I know exactly what I need to do. But those days where I have to do both, sometimes simultaneously in the same scene, is a really about sort of like being so present and aware of your energy and knowing exactly how much energy to exert in the moment. And that is practice. It really is. It's practicing, obviously, the action side of things, which I'm very well practiced in, obviously. And then the acting side is like going to class and practicing, like being in the right space. And then it just becomes somewhat of a muscle where you're able to switch back and forth. I'm still on the hunt for that ultimate gig for me, where I can have a little bit more of like meaty acting bits and scenes and match that with the action. I'm still waiting for like the big gig of that, but it is definitely two different headspaces. And that's where the physical training and the mental training come into play, because you want to be able to use it as a skill and use it as a muscle. And even when I'm training actors, that's one of my favorite parts to talk about with actors when I'm fight coordinating, is like, where do you need to be for this action piece versus where do you need to be for the acting beats? And could talk about it for days. Like it's one of my favorite things. It's this like very interesting space of performing that, oh my god, I could talk about it for hours.
I love it. So it's basically kind of a like your sweet spot there.
Yeah, yeah. It's because I have so much natural intensity, and I think that's why I really pursued stunts, is because it is a space where I can be intense and use all that energy. And acting, that intensity and that energy is wonderful, but it shows up in a very different way. And I think for me personally, I love being able to manipulate that. And I love that acting asks a different space of me than the action fight choreography side of things, but they're both equally valid and useful.
Okay, I see it now. I get it. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I like it. I was like more
Mm-hmm.
badass. I'm loving it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
tell me like how do you approach choreographing fight scenes to make them both safe and visually stunning?
The way I approach choreography is uh, I like to start in the most simplest way possible. What are the bare bones, the skeleton of the choreography that we can set and establish the movement and establish the different tones and levels and tempos we want to hit? And then from there, from that skeleton, I like to be able to sort of step back and watch it so that I can see the picture. I'm a very visual person. So I want to be able to see the visual picture of the choreography. There's certain moments in choreography that I call pictures. And if we took a picture in that spot of the choreography, it would create a very nice aesthetic, whether that be the alignment, the levels, the tempo. And so I want to make sure that we have the bare bones of that before we start adding any of the more complicated, complex tricks and skills. And a lot of times I feel that some of the best and most effective choreography is the most simple choreography. I think if you can get really creative with the simplicity of it, it makes it clearer for the performers to perform. We know what angles to hit. It's going to make it cleaner for camera. So the camera and whoever's behind it is going to be able to see what those angles are. And it makes it safe for the performers involved, whether that's myself and some other dance partners, or it's me choreographing on actors who are performing with other actors, or an actor with a stunt double. It makes it so it's safer for everybody to perform and perform it more consistently. I often find that sometimes when choreography gets a little bit too fast and too intense and too complicated and there's too many tricks, and I am certainly guilty of doing this as well, it just gets like this big jumbled mess and you can't really actually see what's happening. And I like to envision it as if I were the audience and saying like, what am I, if I'm looking at this for the first time, what am I seeing? Because when you know the choreography, you know, well, you could go as fast as you want, you would see it all. But if you're watching this for the first time, either on a screen or say you're the director or somebody on set and they're watching this fight scene for the first time, if it is just like a like, you can't tell anything what's going on. So then the essence of what you're trying to convey in that story of the fight is completely lost. Whereas if you simplify everything, think about clear angles, there it's much easier to pick it's much easier to pick certain spaces to speed up when you need to, or slow down, add a level change if you need to, or make it so that you can do it for 25 takes and not gas out and not hurt your performer. Because that's what happens is when you practice it, you're in a little bit more of a relaxed environment. You don't have that extra adrenaline of the performance. And then you get there on the day of performance and it's like everybody speeds up by 5 to 10%. And you haven't practiced that way. Plus, you have a costume in an environment. Your shoes are the wrong size and you're using a different weapon than you practice with. And so now it's there's all these extra factors that make it that much more difficult. And you're going to be doing this fight scene for the next 6 hours. You're probably going to do at least 30 takes of it in a variety of different ways with all the different camera lenses that they're going to use. And so the more simple and simple doesn't mean boring. I will say that. You can do a lot of really creative work in a simple, easy type of way that is just as effective as overcomplicated choreography. And so it really is just sort of that balance of like, what are the pieces so that we can all do this together and safely? And then if there's room for embellishment, we'll add that later once we have a better idea of what we're looking at. But a lot of times what happens on set is you create this beautiful fight scene and we're running out of time. So then we have to cut a chunk out. And so you have to be able to adjust your choreography in the moment on the day. And then when you're done, that's it. And then it goes to editing. And then you watch the show later when it comes out. And that fight scene has just been like obliterated and it's nowhere near what it used to be. And that happens a lot because if the show is running over time wise, where they're going to start cutting our fight scenes and stunts and all of that. So I often feel that like, yes, we could create the most beautiful, innovative, groundbreaking choreography that's complex and difficult in ways that the audience will never know, but it's completely lost if your audience isn't with you or educated on what you're doing. And I often find that simple, cleaner lines are much more visually and aesthetically pleasing and effective. And then it leaves you room for more technical, complex, difficult movement because your audience isn't just, everything isn't just up here, it's a conversation. So you have a little bit down here, then you come up here, then you go there, rather than everything just sort of being on one level. And the simplicity allows you to do that in a way that everybody can perform it. Because a lot of times we're creating choreography as stunt performers where we have such a deep variety of movement backgrounds available to us, and almost everybody's a world champion or an Olympian or have been practicing their art for decades. And that's all well and good, but then when we have to introduce it to actors, it's a very different scenario because they're not necessarily at the same physical training level as all of us. So what we do has to be actor friendly as well a lot of the times, and that's where the simplicity of it comes in.
That is incredible. I love it. And I love, for example, when in the film they manage to do like the whole fight scene or everything kind of progressive. Like it looks that everything was done like in one take. And then you see
Mm-hmm.
on the behind the scenes that they were actually switching the cameras to another person, to another person, to another person, to another
Yeah.
person to kind of make like the whole transition to it. I mean, when they
Yeah.
do that, I find it like beautiful, like to see like the whole action scene in just in one piece. That's like, oh,
Yeah.
you get the chance to enjoy every little aspect of it, instead
Yeah.
of like sending everything away. You know what I mean?
And
So
that for me, I love those like one take fights as well. Cause that's where like the creativity really comes into it because there's all these extra problems you have to solve while you're doing that. The one I think about a lot is the one from the first season of Daredevil. I think the choreographer and the fight coordinator was Phil Silvera, and they did this whole like one shot hallway fight scene. And there's a lot of moving pieces involved in that. And I think that's where the real creativity is it's not necessarily the actual choreography between person to person. It's how do you tell the story in a new and creative way? And a lot of times the answers to those questions are more simple than you think they are because we want to overcomplicate it because we want to wow people, but sometimes it's just the simplest answer is the right and best answer.
yeah, absolutely. And now that you mention it, like you can tell, like whenever they do like this transition, you get the chance to focus into small things that are happening, like, oh, like look what is happening here. And
Yeah.
and I think that is great because you want, at least to me, I want to see like the whole thing going on. I mean, if you are presenting me a specific fight scene, sure, but throw everything at me, sure, but make it look
Yeah.
like so I can get the chance to enjoy,
Yeah.
yeah, to just sit back and be like, this is awesome, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you a chance to know where to look. Because as an audience member, if you're seeing this for the first time and there's too much coming at you, you don't know where to put your attention at. But when it's very clear about like, okay, we're following this action now, it makes it easier for the audience member to get involved and be a part of the fight scene or the action scene, whatever's happening.
Yeah, totally. I remember when I saw the first time, when I saw the first time, the first John Wick film, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And
Yeah,
then like with the other ones and it's just great. It's just great whenever they
yeah,
get the chance to tell a story with
yeah,
the whole action scene instead of throwing everything at you because it's true. Sometimes if they do that, you will be like, what just happened? You know what I mean? And
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I think when that happens, at least to me, it's like, what, wait, what? Like,
Where you're just like I don't know what just happened. You're
we
just
were just
overwhelmed.
we were just talking, and now I see a car exploding behind you, and what I
Yeah.
mean, like, what the hell? So
Yeah. And then you have to rewind and be like, okay, what? It's like when you are reading a book and you're reading, but you're not actually reading. And then you get to the end of the page and you're like, I don't know what I just read. And then you have to go back to the top of the page to read it again because there's too many words. It's like that. And the guys who do John Wick, the 8711 team, like Chad and Jeremy and all them, like they're masters of telling stories with action. That's why they keep doing the John Wick movies and getting the funding
yeah,
for it, is
absolutely.
because they're good at what they do. Like they're the best in the business at it.
Yeah, it's incredible how they were able to, for example, to focus a little bit when the gun is reloading, when they
Yeah.
actually reload the weapon and things like that. I was speaking with some friends of mine when we saw that film, and I was like, this is one of the few, one of the few films when we get the chance to see actually the gun being reloaded, and instead of suddenly the
Yeah,
gun has like 57 rounds or 1,000 rounds, and you know what I mean?
totally.
So that
Yeah,
was
and then
pretty
they just
cool.
sort of do it off camera and then they bring the gun back up and it's like, yeah, it's very it's there's a certain amount of like patience and embellishment in that patience when you're allowed to do the whole movie as action. And I think that John Wick's a really good example of if they just did like all this action in your face, it would be really hard to watch. And so it's like, how do you tell that story in a way that is compelling and effective?
Yeah, yeah, it's just beautiful. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm-hmm.
that is cool. And tell me, like looking back, what's a piece of advice that you give to your younger self when you were when you were starting out?
I think what I would have really needed to hear as a younger performer is to chill out. It's fine. I often have felt like I'm in a rush and I'm behind and I need to like get somewhere else. Like where I'm at is not good enough. And I think that I wish I would have had the knowledge and the consciousness when I was younger to be able to be a little bit more present with what was happening and appreciate the milestones and the success that I was having at the time, especially when I was a newer performer, like really being like, wow, I am getting my first union credit on a feature film. And I am on set right now when that was like a whole thing I wanted to do when I moved to Vancouver. And here I am. I'm like living my dream right now, or I'm on another show doubling the lead character, or I worked on Deadpool at one point, and that's a huge feature film to be a part of. And just taking a little bit more time to celebrate the wins and the successes, even if they feel minuscule, I think is one of the things I wish I had started doing sooner. And now, as I'm have been around for 20 years, I'm just starting to be able to do that and going back into some of my old, like when I'm watching old footage or just reviewing my career, where I'm like, wow, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of stuff that I had kind of forgotten about. And I've always sort of felt like I'm not there yet, not good enough. Keep going. You're not there. Keep going. Like you're behind. And in reality, I've always been exactly where I needed to be. And there's always been some success around me. But it feels like, and I think this is just sort of a product of our world and where we're at, where we have to feel like we're constantly pushing forward and doing more and doing more, and having that space and awareness to be like, wow, like look what I'm doing right now, and appreciating what I'm doing right now and the things I'm hitting and getting to right now. Like I learned martial arts from scratch when I started doing stunts, and now I feel like I have a base and a knowledge and a wisdom and experience around martial arts. That's a huge thing. Like I started my martial arts journey when I was in my mid 20s and I'm 40 now. And I'm like, oh, I like actually know some stuff. I'm not saying I'm like the expert master of anything, but uh I did that. I started a new thing from scratch in my adulthood and have continued to train it. And look where it's gotten me. And I've worked on all these amazing shows and I've developed an online platform and I've taught all over the world and I continue to be teaching and sought out to work for these amazing opportunities. And that is no small accomplishment. And I think that sometimes we get stuck wishing for the next thing when actually like there's a lot of great things around us. And I think sort of from my own journey, I feel much more healthier and happier and content in my life when I'm looking for the things that are going right rather than looking for all the things that are going wrong. And maybe that's just because I am older and have more wisdom than I did before, but that's what I wanted my younger self to know.
Mm. You know, an actor once told me that you need to enjoy the ride. You know what I mean? That
Yes.
you have an angle, sure, but it's through that ride to that angle that you need to just enjoy it because in those moments is when you get the chance to learn more from learn more from you and to
Yeah.
actually be like, okay, this is actually happening, you know? And instead of
Yeah.
if you focus only on the end goal when you get there, you're gonna be like, okay, what's next? You know what I mean? Instead of
Yeah.
take your time to it. It's a process and just enjoy
Yeah.
those tough
And
times.
if you don't like I've heard I think it was Sandra Oh said in an interview once that this career is a marathon, not a sprint. And very true. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But also at the same time is if you're constantly like I'm trying to get here, I'm trying to get here, that goalpost is constantly moving. It's constantly like you're never going to catch up with it until you decide that you are enough and that you're doing enough and that you are successful in your career. And that's only because you're able to step back and be present and look about what's going right. Uh, and then that goalpost, yeah, it may always be there and you're always working for it, but it doesn't feel as heavy and like you're sprinting all the time. You're just like, no, it's there. And I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other every day. And I'm going to get wherever I'm going to get in that.
Yeah. I think also it's one of the things that we sometimes forget the part that it's going to take a process, and due to that,
Mm-hmm.
we sometimes don't pay attention to the whole thing that it's yeah that sometimes we don't pay attention to the whole picture that is
Yeah,
happening around because we just like like having this on our eyes and
totally.
just watching. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. Yeah, I
yeah.
totally agree.
And tell me, like, what impact do you hope to leave on the film industry through your work as a stunt performer, actress, and fight coordinator?
I think I think performing is performing. I think that there are a lot of factors that go into whether you book a job or not that are completely out of your control, my control. Like, and so I think where I would really love to make an impact and leave a legacy is in the fight coordination space where I want actors to feel empowered in their action. I want to be a person who opened and allowed the space for actors to come in and discover who they are as a mover, as a performer who's performing action and physical movement in a way that's holistic and healthy for them, but ultimately empowering. And one of the questions that I talk with my actors the most is like we go to like, what's your athletic background? Do you like if you have any, but like how can we make this action work for you? Because I genuinely believe if you feel good, you look good. You don't need to move like those guys that have been doing martial arts for 30 plus years. You don't need to move like that person who was a professional dancer. But you, the actor or the performer, how do you feel the most powerful and confident in your body? And that will translate onto the screen as you being super proficient and powerful in your movement. And so what I would love is for actors to be able to find that in themselves. And I love teaching. It is one of my most fulfilling favorite things that I do. And if I can empower that space to an actor, whether it's a new actor or somebody that's like A-list has been working on shows forever, if they can take that piece of advice of if they feel grounded and confident in their own body, and that empowers them to show up more powerfully in their movement on set on the day, then that to me is like one of the greatest gifts. And I want people, especially through teaching, I want people to feel like they can do and learn anything. And when I'm teaching my staff spinning classes, is because that's what I teach on the side all the time. That's my specialty. I like to offer the staff spinning as a way of increasing confidence in their ability to learn new skills. So by learning this skill, this staff spinning skill, that seems like it's fun and it's cool and it looks awesome, but you're learning so much more than staff spinning when you're learning it, because you're learning how to pick up new movement, how to do things in both hands. It's increasing your coordination and your dexterity, and you're also doing this brand new skill and learning something from scratch. And that translates into you learning a fight scene without weapons, a fight scene with weapons. It translates you being able to do some like really cool character based movement, because now you've discovered more space in your body for movement. And if I can open up as many of those doors as possible for people like that, I have done my job, because I have found so much power and competence and security in movement. It is what feeds my life, is being able to move creatively and powerfully and with such a like ease and freedom in my movement. And it has brought me to this space where I have all these wonderful opportunities. And if I can offer that and share that with other people so that they can find what that means for themselves, I think that is a wonderful legacy to leave behind.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I like it. That's pretty cool.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
That's
you.
like even like more super badass, you know?
Just because I'm super badass, like I wasn't born super badass, that means everybody else could be super badass.
But that's the thing
And if
here
I can
because
help you get there.
yeah, totally. Because since you were starting out and then you were able to become super badass, now you're like, I get it now. So now you
Mm-hmm.
help people to
Yeah.
get into 100. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like it. That is awesome. Now, if you could create your dream project, combining acting, stunts, and fight choreography, what would it be?
Okay. My dream project is uh I'm the lead actor. I do as much of my stunts as possible. Um, it wouldn't be possible to do all of it just for a workload standpoint. And also, again, like it's a very different mental preparation. But I would love the opportunity to be one of the lead actors. I'm doing as much as my action as possible. I get to pick my own stunt double, and I would use my friend Andrea Ross. She fills in all the gaps of the things that I would genuinely be like, I don't need to do that. She's the one that would be like, I want to do it. And we're like, she's one of my very dear friends. So she's my stunt double. And then in the meantime, I'm also involved in the choreography and the creation of the action, because I'm also fight coordinating. If I'm the lead actor, I also have to be mindful of the workload of fight coordinating, but to just be in there as part of the stunt team, helping train some of the other actors when I have time, because that also gives me an opportunity to connect with my fellow castmates. And I get to certainly choreograph my own work or my own action that it's going to be really hard for other people to choreograph for me. So yeah, so I would just sort of have my hands in as many different piles as possible, and just to feel like I'm making such a valuable creative contribution to a show and a project. I think that would be amazing. I would love to be Asajj Ventress in the Star Wars universe. Like I will shave my head at a moment's notice. Like, please. Double weapons are my favorite. And also, it's really hard to train an actor to look confident and proficient with two weapons in their hands. But for me, that's the easy part for me. And I think I have the right intensity for the role. So that's like my dream role. But I'm also not opposed to just writing my own thing and and building the show that I want myself. But that's what I would want, and I would want it to be uh, in a location that I can bring my cats with me and they can live in my trailer or come to set with me. That's like my dream as like what level I want to work at in the film industry is like I want to be able to bring my cats to work. Maybe even possibly write my cat George, he's over there, into it because he is a superstar waiting to happen. He could be the next Airbud. So that would be my dream project. Somewhere out there. It's
There you
it's
go.
it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I like it, especially like the whole cat thing.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And let's say, one day I call you and I tell you that I want to starting the whole stunt performing world,
Uh-huh.
acting. So, based on what you know, what do you think that would be a good place for me to start, knowing that I have zero experience, nothing?
If you had zero experience and you wanted to jump into the film industry, the first place I would start is start training. So wherever, like if you want to be an actor, get into an acting class. If you want to be a stunt performer, start taking some sort of martial arts class. It could be any martial art. If you're starting from scratch, I would pick boxing or Muay Thai because most of the time, if you're in a scene or it's a bar brawl and you have to fight, it's going to be punching. So just get the basics down of my cats are fighting. Oh, you can't see it. My cats are fighting right there. Get the basics down of movement or get the basics down of acting. But the other thing about training is you're meeting other people who are on the same trajectory as you. And a huge part of working in stunts, especially a little bit in acting, but mostly in stunts, is it's about who you know. Because in stunts, we don't use agents. So you have to be able to connect with the stunt coordinator in the stunt community yourself in order to get the work. You have to be the one who is connecting and making those dots and making those connections because that's what's going to bring you the work. Alternatively, if you're in acting class, like you do use agents for acting classes, but a lot of agents won't even take on people to their roster unless you have some sort of acting training or acting work on your resume already. But also you're in those acting classes and you're meeting other people who want to be actors. And that is going to create a community around you. And when you have a community around you, everything just feels easier. And then from there, you will know your next steps. Like for stunts, my first thing is start training because you're going to meet the people who are also training. Those people are working, and then suddenly your name is being thrown out into spaces, and it takes a little bit of time. That's the other thing I would say is if you want to jump into the film industry, give yourself 5 years to like get your first gig. 5 years, especially now because the film industry is notoriously inconsistent, but it's really slow right now. There's been a lot of cuts to the amount of work that we're used to, especially in the last 10 or so years. So getting into a space of training is putting you in the environment of doing the actual work. Because if you go to an acting class and you're like, I hate this, you probably don't want to be an actor then. Or you go to a boxing class and you're like, I don't like getting punched in the face. This is too hard. And then you're like, okay, you probably are not the right fit for a stunt performer, and that's okay. But that's where I would absolutely start because you need to build up your skills. And the whole thing about being a stunt performer is you never stop training and you're always continually you're continuing to call skills to you by training new skills because you want to be prepared for the job as much as possible, and you never know what's going to come up in the job. And so the more you know, the more you have available to you and the more work you're going to get. So uh it's just this constant, like you just have to keep building and you just keep building your little ladder one step at a time, and then one day you'll be able to climb that ladder and stand on it and get your first gig.
There you go. I like it. I'll tell you what, if I ever do that, which that would be fun, but if I ever do that, I'll be mentioning you in my thank you speech when I'm writing my memoirs.
Perfect. Amazing. I love it. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Sounds like a plan. I like it. And like, what do you think, that the future holds for stunt performers in the film industry?
Well, I hope that we get a handle on this AI issue that we're having right now. A lot of what's happening for stunts as an industry on a whole is the technology has grown so much in the last couple of years that the VFX post production side of things has made it easier for them to use AI computer generated images of people to perform gnarly gags and stunts. And so what that does is it's taking away the work from the actual stunt performers. And this has happened to me a lot. Like I'll go on to a show. I'll give the example of Deadpool, for example. So I was one of the lead stunt doubles on Deadpool. I doubled Angel Dust, and I rehearsed over 10 wire gags. So when I was in a harness being pulled into various spaces, I performed 3 of them on the day because the rest they either decided they didn't have time to do or they're just going to do by CGI anyway. So they didn't need me. And that was 2015. So that was almost 10 years ago. And the technology has expanded since then. So there's a lot of stunt performers that are losing work to this new technology. And I don't know if it's any more or less expensive because VFX and the whole like that side of post production is quite expensive. It's also an expense for producers to have stunt performers on set performing the gag. But there's what's missing when they use AI in those shots is that element of realness and humanness. Like we can tell it's sort of that uncanny valley thing where you're like, I know that that was CGI. I know that that was an AI double doing this gag. And one of the things that I liked about David Leitch's Fall Guy movie is he tried to do all the stunts as practically as possible because there's an essence to it that it's so subtle, but we can tell as humans. We can tell when it's real people and we can tell when it's computer people. And what they did in Fall Guy is they tried their best to do all of the gags practically as much as possible. And I think it worked for that show. It's why that show is so great. I loved that movie for that reason. Is like you're actually seeing that that's a real body flying through space, or that's a real body falling out of that helicopter and into a pad. And so I think what we're losing is that real essence and the art of stunts, the art of designing a gag that should seem impossible and making it safe enough for a performer to perform multiple times in a row rather than that's a AI generated human and it's not real and it feels kind of wonky about it. And so I hope that we get a handle on all of that so that myself and people in my peer group in my industry aren't out of work. Because if they're using AI, that means that somebody's not working or getting paid for that when that was somebody's job for the last 20 years or longer, obviously. But yeah, I think that's a real danger of what's happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, yeah, it's just crazy. It's just crazy what is
Mm-hmm.
happening, what is happening, and I do hope that at least we can get the chance to people demanding more the human side to it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because sure, I mean, look, it looks cool, sure, but I do think and I do hope that at some point people will be tired of it and be like, okay, we need the human side of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want those those emotions, those things that actually distinct for
Yeah.
a human from an AI. Because it's true, you can sometimes tell with whenever they are portraying this CGI stuff that it was not coordinated at all, and that it was just made by an AI.
Yeah.
And I think when that happens, at least to me, you kind of lose that, like that beauty of it. You know what I mean? Like that touch to it.
Yeah. There's something sacred about the art of making something. And if you're using, like, it's a balance of like, what are you going to use these tools that help you elevate your project, like VFX and sound and color grading, all the stuff that really adds to the product that you made afterwards, after it's been physically filmed. But then when you go too far and you're taking away from the human essence of it and you're moving it into AI, it is sort of demeaning the sacred art that you're creating, because art and creativity is like a very, you have to be present and in the flow, and it's like a very almost spiritual place to be in when you're sort of channeling that energy. And if you take away that, it loses the integrity of the project, I think. And I, that's just a conversation that we're going to continue to have for the next several decades until we have a handle on the AI. It's going to be this sort of battle back and forth of people wanting to save money and then people saying like, no, like the artistry is what's important. And I agree that the artistry is what's important, and we're sort of seeing it across the board. Unrelated to AI is where all these studios are canceling shows left, right, and center before they've even had a chance to find their core audience, because they're not seeing the numbers that they want in the first week. Is like, you're so out of touch with the audience and the people consuming this art, whereas like there's all these people on the ground making these shows being like, no, but we want to create. We're creatives. That's why we're in this industry, is because it's creative. Whereas the people in charge are just concerned about money and optics and views, and there's a big disconnect in between, and so it's this constant conversation. And that's what's happening in the industry right now, is they're canceling a bunch of shows, and that means they cancel those shows, people are out of work, and it's all in the name of like saving money, but now these people can't work, and it's a mess. It's a mess out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hope that they manage to understand that we need to use AI to work with us and not for
Yes.
us, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And because that's the thing here. And I do appreciate, because at the end it's arts, we need it needs to have like the human touch to it. It's creating, it's art, it's like the human touch that we when once we are seeing it, we feel related to it, we feel connected to it.
Yes.
And I do think that no matter how incredibly advanced an AI can be at some point, is never gonna be matching 100% of a person that is creating something for it. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I agree.
totally, totally. And my last question, so we can all
Hmm.
enjoy and relax after an epic chat. Just saying. So
Uh-huh.
here it is. What do you think that could be the best title for this episode?
Oh my gosh, I'm terrible at naming things. How do how how to be your badass self from a stunt performer, or a stunt performer tells you how to be more badass. I don't know. I'm terrible at naming things.
Take take your time. It happens. Like usually this question is like the trickiest one for all of
Yeah.
it.
Well, people will ask me, like, when I'm doing like weapon stuff or staff tricks, and people will be like, "What's that trick called? What's that trick called?" And I don't have names for things, and I'm like, I don't know. Or I took ballet my whole life, and I still don't know what half the things are called. Same with martial arts. Been doing martial arts for like 15 years. Don't know what anything is called, because I don't store information in my brain by the name of things. It's the visual, and so I know what the movement is. I don't know what the name of it is. So I often have to tell my followers, I'm like, you can name this, give me a suggestion. And then they give me like these awesome creative names. I'm like, great, that's what it's called now. We've decided this is what this skill is called.
What if we call it, like, super randomly came into my head, 30 60 backflip and how to be a badass.
360 backflip and how to be that. Does that mean I have to do a backflip? I don't want to do one right now.
No, 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 no. But something like that,
Something.
or oh, I got it. 360 on how to be a badass.
Oh, yeah. The full
Yeah,
360 on being a badass.
there you go.
Oh, we figured it out. We
There you
figured
go.
it out.
And at the end, what can I say? The fact that you're doing it, the fact that you're making it happen, that you are, yeah, that you are showing results, that you are. I mean, that is super badass, and that is amazing because it shows that everything is possible. And whenever we can get the chance to relate on someone who get things done, that is amazing, especially right now in this crazy world. So yeah, it's epic what you do. I love it. Keep doing what you do, and yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear that, because I often feel like I'm not doing enough. And if I can just be someone that acts as a role model for people who have big goals and big dreams, whether that's in the film industry or not, if I can role model determination and perseverance and moving with awareness and flow, and it helps somebody, then I'm very, very happy for that.
Yeah, you're doing, and I'm sure you're doing it. I'm super sure that there's people out there who sees you as a role model and who sees you as someone who get things done. And as I was saying before, that is super inspirational because we need more people like you who, besides giving us epic content, can also showing us between the lines that, hey, if I can do it, you can do it too. So
yeah, absolutely. Because that's the thing. Like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm no different than anybody else on this planet. Like, we're all the same here.
There you go. I love it. So I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you, Michelle, for making this happen. I also want to thank those who stayed the whole episode. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Now in the description, you're gonna find all of Michelle's social media. Let's follow her. If you're already following her, let's continue making her viral. #Team Michelle. And again, thank you for making this happen. Keep shining out there. Keep rocking. Keep rocking. Keep being super badass. And I'll see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.